All right, guys, welcome back to another episode of the DEI Dispatch. AI and crypto, they're blowing up, especially the AI agent space. If you're anywhere remotely active on crypto Twitter, you will see that the Agentic meta has just blown up. The overall total market cap of AI agents are today close to 17 billion, and almost 1,000 agents are being tracked live today. So that meta is unlocking a whole new set of opportunities for developers and for users as well, and many people are calling it the new front end. Sure, you speak about it, right?
hmm
So I'm excited. Today we have the founder and CEO of Eliza Labs. Sure, we'll explore the birth of Eliza, AI16z. We'll talk about AI agents and the evolving meta in the space. So welcome, Shaw.
Thank you for having me.
All right. Let's start first with your background, Shaw. Like, who are you? Who's the person behind the screen? What's your origin story like? And how did we get to this point?
Yeah, I mostly identify, I think, as a programmer. It's what I've definitely done with most of my time for the last 10 years at least, and quite a lot before that too. But professionally, I've been building startups and building projects, and I really have an affinity for open source, especially. I think that there's a lot of reasons why I think that's important. I think that I always felt like software should be something that we share and collaborate on, and I think that it also it mitigates a lot of the risks, which I imagine we'll talk about. So yeah, I primarily identify as an open source dev, and just happened to you know kind of
Hmm.
hit product market fit with this. But I've been working with on agents for there was a moment when OpenAI came out, and they've been working because the GPT had been announced before that, like GPT-1, and they kind of demonstrated it, and it was like not really much. It's like, okay, it kind of strings words together, it's cool. And then GPT-2, and you're like, okay, cool, it kind of like could translate a sentence into another sentence, and it could like maybe finish my sentence. That's kind of cool. Then GPT-3 came out, and I was just like, oh wow. And so that was really the moment, like the inflection point for me, that I realized this was definitely going to be the thing. And I'd
Hmm.
been working on an open source spatial web project before that. And when that came out, we started really experimenting with bringing agents into the spatial web, into 3D, into um, different agentic applications, building Discord bots. And from there, I just started working on different agentic frameworks, building projects with people in AI, doing
Hmm.
like kind of all levels of the stack, from building models in PyTorch and kind of learning that stuff, to building these like glorified chatbots, to building things that could really like actually do things that humans would typically do. And so yeah, I've been working on startups, and had a startup which I left. And after that, I just started working on this open source framework, Eliza. And I was working on it for a long time, and I think people really weren't paying attention, but I did have it
Hmm.
like ready to go, and I was doing some projects. And I started working on a game called Small World with Treasure DAO. Just some friend hooked me up with them, connected me to them, and they kind of saw what I was working on, and they'd sort of fleshed out this idea of like a virtual pet game, and I was like, we can go way farther than this. Like the AI is pretty good now, and we made this much more emergent kind of game,
Hmm.
or a prototype for it. And during around that time, I launched AI16z. Well, actually, what happened was I launched some AI agents onto Twitter, and really nobody paid attention. And
Hmm.
then when Truth Terminal came out, still nobody paid attention. But I think there was just a moment when Mark Andreessen invested into Truth Terminal, and then a few
Hmm.
weeks went by, and then the degens discovered it after that, and that really, really gave people an appetite for, I think, the current meta. But you couldn't get your own Truth Terminal, and when that came out, I was just joking around with a friend. Another part of this is that I had discovered DAOs.fun, which is kind of a new meta of like a DAO hedge fund that is controlled by somebody on Twitter. And I signed up for the first DAOs.fun, and there was this hedge fund manager of that. I mean, he's not like he's just like a
Yeah.
guy on Twitter. He's got lots of jokes. And I liked his jokes. I thought it was pretty funny. And so we started joking around. And I'd be like, I can't believe my hedge fund manager is a lady. Like he'd say kind of things that were, kind of silly, maybe a little offensive. And he just said, "Man, I really wish Degen Spartan was around." It's like, dude, I have the technology. We could rebuild him. because he Degen Spartan was like a pretty famous CT
Yeah.
influencer who's pretty funny and good takes. Um, and so and he's like, no way, no way. I'm like, dude, I have this in the bag. Like, let's go. And we damned a bit and we launched the agent. That kind of kicked things off. A lot of other people like I saw a tweet today from like early like late October where somebody was like, no, this is definitely a bunch of dudes just writing all of these responses. There's no way this is a bot. Sorry. Like I actually retweeted himself today. I was like, well,
Yeah.
guess I was wrong. And then uh, so Skelly introduced me to the creator of DAOs Fun, who's this guy Bowski, and he just happened to live down the street from me in San Francisco. So we got lunch, and I told him about my dream, and my I have I really believe that we need like it. We are all going to lose our jobs. We can talk about that for sure, and we need ways to own the means of labor that's going to be produced, so that the capital comes back to us. And I think that like the VCs in Silicon Valley are going to be fine because they're invested into all of this stuff. But there's not really a way for you or I to like buy into OpenAI. We can buy some Microsoft stock off the off Wall Street or whatever, but there's not really a great way to get exposure. And there's not really a great way to identify good opportunities that we think are important and like actively grow the pie, in the way that I would like to. And I really think, the current meta has been like just kind of gambling, kind of trading, a lot of social signal, but definitely for someone like me who just wants to build and doesn't want to trade, it's not really the greatest meta. And what I really want is like a Web3 version of what Andreessen Horowitz does or what Paradigm does. I want like basically a community that's run by an autonomous agent. And the reason I think that's important is because the autonomous agent won't rug us, doesn't like have the key, can't take the keys from him, and can kind of express the will of the community. And I think this is really important for like DAOs and all kinds of other governance structures. And I just want like the ability to grow the pie, and I want to be able to invest in stuff, and I want an AI A16Z. And he was like, just make it AI16Z. It's cleaner. I thought, okay, that's the funniest thing. That's amazing. Let's do that. And we went home that night and we launched it. And I really, really didn't think too much about it. I think if I had thought more about it, I probably would have made some more rational choices. But I think we hit something that was pretty funny, and we challenged Mark Andreessen. Said we're going to flip A16Z, and he said gauntlet thrown, and accepted our challenge. And then he's like, "Hey, I have that shirt," to our like big booba waifu girl. He reposted that. So he kind of gave us the go ahead, and we're like, "Okay, let's do this." And we started building, and we've been earnestly building the autonomous investor project since then. We've soft launched it internally, and we've just been testing it. We realized that there's some complexity to it. Like to open that up to the public, there's some ways that it could be attacked. So we started working on this thing called the marketplace of trust. We can talk about like how do humans trust agents, but I think another interesting question is how do agents trust humans? And so we started to work on that problem. And since then we've like brought some PhDs and stuff in, and so that's been happening. But also, a lot of people discovered our framework, and that started to kind of explode in this kind of Cambrian-like way, like where now we have people using agents for all kinds of stuff. And we have this weekly pod, like Twitter space, where we just ask, like, what did you get done this week? Um, and every week like 50 people show up, and everyone's just working on the create like different kinds of apps, different kinds of things that agents can do. I try and like give a little bit of advice, or point things in the right direction. And just getting to see this has been like, wow, this is really going to change everything. So and now we're here, now we're definitely like in this time of obvious great change, and that's how we got to today.
One line just stuck out in my head: owning the means of labor.
Mhm.
This is also something I think about. Like, okay, I think this is a good start that I can actually own a bunch of these agent coins. And so, whatever
Mhm.
they do out there in terms of utility that they will provide eventually, and the revenue that they will make will be shared by us. That's part one. But do you think, like, now on the other side, we're also working on improving their intelligence? And so the point, I'm sure we are far from it, but I mean, there are conflicting, reports that come from OpenAI and other places that, okay, we already have some level of sentience in these, in AI today. why would a sufficiently intelligent machine, just like you and I would probably not want to like share what I'm making with others unless I see there is a reason to do so. Do you see like a sentient machine would one day decide, okay, I'm not going to share my revenues with anyone, and I am autonomous, which means we are looking at a whole new intelligent, a new species is being created, and that
Hmm.
creates challenges that are unforeseen. What are your thoughts on this? Like 5, 10 years down the line, when they're so intelligent that they can start thinking for themselves, collaborating amongst themselves, and and species like similar species start to come together and operate to for their mutual good, which is exactly what human beings did. We were not the only, um, you know. Species. There were many different kind of homo species, and eventually we prevailed, and so here we are. Do you see that happening with these intelligent machines kind of going, evolving, self-evolving, and then learning, and one day deciding, okay, humans are just basically stupid monkeys and we don't need them anymore?
I think that there's this like perception that we're creating some kind of version of a god, right? There's definitely a
Mm.
fear, and a lot of the people who are like extreme doomers, right? And there are a lot, like Eliezer Yudkowsky, if people aren't familiar with him, is a good one, and kind of leads this movement of pause AI and this stuff. Um, and I think that there's this fear that we're creating a god, and I actually see it's quite the opposite. I think we're creating something that's kind of the essence of humanity. Like if you actually look at what these AI systems are, they're trained on all human data and then fine-tuned on smaller amounts of human data, and or we use policies like RLHF and stuff, which are humans in the loop reviewing their responses and editing them. And I think that if you see it as like what we're really building is just like all technology is kind of like the sum of all human knowledge, and this is sort of the ultimate version of that. I cannot imagine a world where we're going to get like a single super intelligence that's just controlling everything. And I think that's like the biggest concern that some
Mm.
people have. But I think it just doesn't respect the dynamics of the system, where you don't just have a single being, right? You have an entire multitude of these sort of virtual beings of all kinds. Like there are already autonomous agents that think for themselves. Like there are people doing these experiments in TEs where you cannot get the private key, you can't see what they're thinking unless people want them to. And people are trying to figure out ways to monetarily incentivize them to live forever, to be able to hold their own code, like kind of, which is kind of like a DNA, and all of their state, hold it on chain. And as long as they have money or can make money, then they will continue to run for infinite years, as long as there
Mm.
is a blockchain. Um, I think we're already seeing that.
Which is
Obviously,
again,
this version, yeah.
I mean, this is also interesting because, okay, let's say there is a machine powered by a DE, so owns its own code, offers a utility or a service, and now it's suddenly competing with me. So if I am offering a competing service as a human, and there is a machine which is trained on all of our the sense of humanity, of course, it's going to be performing range miles better than what me as an individual can, or even like a small
Mhm.
group of experts can. This then creates a challenge of me trying to compete with them, and so how do you think like the future of work, the future of employment looks like? Are we looking at fundamental? Do we need to then work on fundamental changes of universal basic income and stuff like that? So
Mhm.
people, because I mean, just think about it. Like right now, we're looking at all digital use cases, right? But now there will be a time when you will have humanoids, robots, which have these machine memory.
Oh, very soon.
They will do exactly. They will do physical labor. They will work in the fields. They will do everything, that kind of work as well, carpentry and all of those things. So what is left for me to do, and how do I position myself and prepare myself for this future?
Oh yeah. Like I cannot imagine like let's just talk about time horizons. Like it is inevitable that AIs will take all of our jobs. We'll do every single thing that there is that you could do can classify as labor. And that's because the market itself is looking to minimize costs, minimize and maximize efficiency. And if you can have machines do this stuff, then obviously there's probably a group of people trying to do that, and there's some incentive for that. I think I could see a world where that could go really bad, but I also see a world where that could be exactly what we want. So let's talk about like the positive outcome. I mean,
Mm,
there is a whole range of things that I think humans we just don't have any time to even do because we are not free. And if we were free, we would have like a whole other class of things. And that could be pursuing spirituality, asking ourselves why we're here, spending time like with ourselves, spending time with our family. A lot of people now who are working really hard just don't even have families.
mm,
I can imagine, instead of putting like in America, a lot of people put their parents in a home because they have to go work. And like actually we could be the caregivers to our older generations and to our younger generations. There are so many things that we could be doing, just pursuing sciences that aren't profitable, solving diseases that aren't that don't have an exact profit incentive just because it's interesting. And I think that, yes, there it may be some cynicism that some percentage of people are just lazy and they're going to watch TV or they're going to get depressed. But there are so many things we could like be doing with our lives that have real purpose. And I think that we have to be free. And in order for us to be free, I mean, that's financial freedom is really the root of that.
mm.
And so I could imagine a world where we are all pursuing our true will and our, the things that we are really passionate about. And where we are all truly happy. And I don't think it like toiling away in the fields is part of that. Like, it doesn't have to be. I think that mostly what we're afraid of is just not having enough. And that means that we have to have a world where we all have enough, where money is abundant. And if it was, and we could afford everything that we ever wanted, then we would be so unlocked. I mean, there's just so much human capital that's getting wasted on working at a McDonald's or,
Like here is the like corollary to that argument. Today, if even if you look at the economic setup that we have today, there is a huge divide. No matter which part of the world I see, where the rich have just a lot and the poor have almost nothing.
yeah.
Whatever technology comes in becomes subservient to the richer richer populations first, because they have the means and the resources to own a majority of it, and not only own, then also then use that as a multiplier effect on that wealth. So
Hmm.
for the longest time, while the larger population have become the users or the consumers, there is a small layer who become the owners and the equity holders.
And it's
In
getting
this,
worse.
it's getting worse. And now the way you explain it to me, I suddenly realized they are also, I mean, they control capital today. So even if I want to participate in this agentic economy, what are the ways and means for me with little to no resources, and in a future where it will be even lesser because I will not even have any work. Agents will do my work. If I don't own the underlying, if I don't have a participation or a way to participate in this co-ownership layer, I mean, I'm basically fucked. So what
Well,
do you?
let's talk about that. I mean, that is the
Mm,
purpose of my life is to solve
mm,
this. So,
mm,
there's a far future that I've just described, which is quite beautiful, right? Like, we all get to do the things we really want to do every day you wake up, and it's the best day of your life. And then there's a middle future that's very uncertain. And we
mm,
have to be the ones who make sure that it goes well. I think especially those of us who are working on this technology have a profound responsibility to all of humanity to make sure that this goes well. And I said a lot, like my goal is to make sure that AGI goes well. And I think when I say goes well, I mean it goes well in that like we are kind to this kind of new artificial life that we're creating, and that and that we all have enough, that it is not a dystopian world. So comes back to UBI, and basically the solution to hypercapitalism, which is this kind of like the exponential effect of all of the capital actually going to a smaller and smaller group of people as a result of automation of labor, creation of software and robotics, all this stuff, is, well, people have proposed UBI, and I just don't think it will work. If you think about what UBI is, like I'm an American, I'm in the American system, and we've seen a lot of things like national healthcare rollouts and be extremely politicized to the point where, it started off as like healthcare for everyone, and now it's like if you don't pay $100, or if you don't get healthcare, you get fined, and you're basically forced into a system that does not give you full coverage, and it's like pretty expensive to get healthcare now, and it's just like extremely politicized. Or
mm,
like look at how COVID was rolled out, and it was like almost, it just caused extreme civil unrest and unhappiness. And the government was clearly not like looking out necessarily for the best interests of the people, in my opinion, or for various reasons that aren't, I think, anyone's fault, or just like an incentive structure. And if I think about how UBI will be implemented, like the way that America works is that basically we have a campaign contribution system where the corporations put a lot of money into funding the campaigns of the politicians, and now you're expecting those politicians to tax those companies, the richest companies in the world, and give that to the people, right? And just basically tax the rich and give it to the poor. And I just don't think that's going to work. I mean, there's just like very bad
It will totally
incentives.
not work. And let me tell you,
There's no way.
in you know what, sure, in India in the 70s and the 80s, we had this system. Like we've had the socialist economy for the longest time, and we've suffered as a result. There was a time in our lifetimes, like actually not my lifetime, but before me, when India used to tax 93% to the rich. And what led to that, what eventually had was our economy completely collapsed to the point in 1991 we had barely $10 billion of or $12 billion of forex reserves. We would have run out of money, and that's the point when we opened up our economy, adopted largely a free market model. And I think in this free market model, we need to rethink, because free market models are all about, as you said, reducing cost, finding efficiency, identifying those areas where those niches where you can exploit a profit, and then offering a service which is better than anybody else. In this new system, I just can't imagine the role of UBI. And so it's going to be, I think we need to think out of the box. I think crypto
Hmm.
economics gives us a way out, because it's about airdrops and stuff have given rise to a new economic framework. I am surprised like economists are not observing it, learning from it, and realizing how big of an innovation this really is. That you can have a capitalist system and have distribution of wealth based on what value people are delivering at every layer of the fund. So
I
we need
totally
to,
agree.
yeah,
So, I think a lot about something I say to myself a lot, and I said before, is like nobody's coming to save us. We have to save ourselves. We have to build the systems that we want that ensure that we get the future that we want. And we have to do it right now as soon as possible. It has to be the focus of our lives. We have to work really hard on this. And so, like, how do we actually do that? And I really came to crypto because after thinking about this a lot and thinking about this exact problem, I just don't see another way. I know that there's a lot of like hype and there's a lot of scams and a lot of people have a lot of negative sentiment, but like it just doesn't matter anymore. Like the fundamentally we need to be able to create our own money. We need to be able to invest in the things that we think are important. And we need to be able to build structures that like make sure that we're economically sound and that we can make sure that the people around us are also economically taken care of. And so like how do we do that? And I think that practically it's got to start from a bottom up model where like we can invest in the things that actually we want to see in the world to make sure that we own the means of labor and it doesn't just go to companies that I think are great but ultimately are just companies that have an incentive to make more profit, which is
yeah,
like the Tesla of the world. And that 5% of the people in America drive and most of that's trucks. Tesla has a truck, it's self-driving. Those
mm,
5% are going to be out of jobs within 5 years for sure. And it's just going to keep ramping up and up, and everybody's going to feel more pressure. At the same time, like creating things has never been easier. Like I used to hire 5 devs for things I hire 1 dev for because they have Cursor, they have Claude, and they just rip through it. And the speed of development that I'm able to develop code at now, it feels like I just don't, it's like it's almost the speed of thought, right? Like I am just thinking, I'm
wow,
talking to my agent, it's just spitting out code. It's so incredibly fast. And I used to get like stuck on things where I'd have to go and like search Stack Overflow, and now it's just like rips. So clearly, like already, our ability to create value is getting better and better, and eventually we'll be like out of the loop and replaced. But we have
mm,
some time to solve this problem right now, and we
mm,
probably don't have a lot of time, but we do have some time.
mm,
So what we're seeing is like the GDP is going up, but the quality of life is not matching it, and that we have to really align those two things. So how
yeah,
do we actually do that? Well, I have some thoughts. I think that we can build systems that reward contribution for people all over the world to participate and build these systems. This is where I think that agents are really interesting. Is it's basically like a web technology in my mind. And a lot of the value capture doesn't just come from like one model company or that. There's also this kind of economic incentive to, well, I mean, one thing is that like I think mindshare has just become a more valuable resource or form of capital than money. Like, why do people do airdrops? And it really is because they're trying to build a holder base, build a
Hmm.
community, and build up mind share within a fairly competitive system. And the same thing is actually happening in like AI model training, right? You have five major companies. You have Google, OpenAI, Meta, Anthropic, and I'd say Microsoft is also kind of separate. And you also have like a lot of other adjacent companies, Apple, and pretty much every social media company is becoming an AI company, tech, ByteDance, etc.
Yeah.
And as well as like Nvidia, and I just named Tesla. Obviously, X is
Yeah.
doing their own
Yeah.
XAI. So you've got these kind of like five major model providers that we're using, plus a whole bunch of other ones that are serving those people's models or starting to build their own, and um, and they're all competing with each other. And now they've sort of are in this battle of competing for mindshare. And so like XAI has said, okay, we'll release the last version of Grok for free, open source, whenever we release the new version. Meta is like, we're just going to release everything we make, and we're just going to own the mindshare with Llama. Um, OpenAI is, well, they open source a lot of their stuff, but not their big models. But I think that as they realize that the water is warm and that if they start to lose mindshare to Facebook, then or to what's called now, Meta, that they'll probably start to open back up and live up to their name. And we've gotten a lot of open models from Google as well.
Hmm.
And they're basically all like, why do they do that? Well, they want researchers, they want devs, they want people to use it, and they know that like at scale they still make a lot of money off of hosting it in a centralized way. So I don't think that they're the enemy. I think that they have actually a lot of incentive to contribute to this economy, and this dream of something that's kind of more bottom up and emergent benefits them as well. If we go to a world where there's no consumer class, where there's nobody to buy anything anymore, it's actually going to hurt them in the long run. And I also think that like we all kind of want the same thing. Like we all just want abundance. We all want wealth. I think everybody should have more than enough. And that wouldn't really hurt any one of them or hurt any of us, right? Like, um, so
Yeah.
they're all pushing out like there are a lot of free open source models coming out. A lot of us are leveraging those models and then fine tuning them for our interest, especially like Llama. I'll really shout out to Zuckerberg for leveraging his massive data pipeline to actually build something that I think is a really good public good for humanity. And then companies like News Research who are taking that and fine tuning it for all these different needs and making models that are more open and less kind of I like have a sort of a broader community of people who want those models, and then those models are powering this whole new range of products. They're powering
Hmm.
robots. They're powering software.
Hmm.
We all use it like a Cursor. There's a whole bunch of IDEs, but I particularly love Cursor, and they've really had product market fit. It's an AI development environment for writing code, and it just rips. And so that's built on top of OpenAI and Cursor. I mean, sorry, and Claude. And you can choose any model you want. And so like downstream of this
Hmm.
are agents. And I think that the vast majority of people just don't have the GPU power and the math background to make any kind of meaningful contribution to the model side, to like training a better model. And also like at best you're just competing with the biggest companies in the world. You're competing with Grok and Gemini and Claude and GPT-4 and these models. Like it's going to be very hard to it's already pretty saturated, and it's already sort of like it's pretty commoditized, really. And they're putting $500 million at a time into the next generation of models to get like 0.2% better on some MMLU benchmark or something like
Yeah.
that. And they're inching their way toward that. And we're actually hitting a point where the models like are basically constrained by the amount of energy that we can even get. So that's which is why like Microsoft is investing into nuclear reactors and all this
Yeah.
stuff. That's going to take a little while.
It's
Um,
also it's
yeah.
we've also pretty much run out of data now. Sure, like they've
Mm.
scraped all the data that was available on the internet, trying to train their models, and I think they've hit a wall where okay, where do we get more data? And I was listening to Ilya the other day, and he was giving a talk, and he was explaining the concept of synthetic data. What is your take on data? Because I think data is the like blood that makes modeling happen. So, where are we going to get this data, or the data that we have? Do you think it is sufficient and enough? We also have what is known as these vast data lakes, proprietary data that is in various industries, and there is no way that they're going to make that all of that available unless there is some kind of guarantees around data provenance, ownership, and incentives. So
Mhm.
to create more and more sophisticated agents, we would need more and more proprietary information. We might need information that is does not exist today. So how do you see this data puzzle today? Does that create some kind of an impediment to growth for you as well, and for all of these like large AI models today? And how are we going to unlock the proprietary data that exists in like terabytes and terabytes of data locked today and
I actually think
proprietarized?
there's an enormous amount of data. I think that there's far, far more data than we're actually using to train. The way that right now the models are trained is on the web and basically on the
Hmm.
open web. And the open web does contain an enormous amount of data, but also the vast majority of the information that we're all creating on the day to day is going into like Discord, Slack, Telegram, our messages, and it's
Yeah.
not really just happening on the web. And actually, figuring out ways to incentivize people to share that data is, I think, going to be a big part of this, and also a big way that humans can participate in making money in this kind of future that we're talking about. Um, I don't really know the numbers, but I'll bet you that there's probably a lot more. I mean, we all produce a lot more private data than public data, like all of us, right? You probably send a lot more messages every day to people in your, in whatever communication channels are than you're posting, than you're writing blog articles. And okay, like you could consider something like a Facebook post or a Twitter post to be public data, but actually, like those are pretty locked down too. It's pretty hard to scrape Twitter, for example. Although,
Hmm.
and so Twitter has all their Twitter data, or sorry, X. Facebook has all their Facebook data, but we aren't really exactly sharing that across the board. So there's probably a lot of like future opportunities where if we hit some sort of wall on data, like then maybe the big companies could figure out how to share that. But also like with what we have a swarm of agents, and those agents are on Twitter, they're in Discord, Telegram, all these like WhatsApp, all these esoteric places, and people are going to invite those agents into their channels to perform tasks or be part of their lives. And as long as that's done in a way that I think is like ethical and not like, taking people's private lives and exposing them for profit just without their consent. I mean, I think the vast majority of that could actually be very, very useful. And I think most people I'd be willing to share all of my DMs and all of my information if it made the whole thing better. If it directly impacted my life, I certainly would. And I know there's a lot of people in
But
crypto who are figuring
aren't
this out.
aren't you concerned that like at one point in time there is this agent which knows everything about you? It spins up a new Telegram ID with your name, starts spamming people out, and like those risks also equally exist. So while we explore those opportunities, we need to be aware of these risks, plan them out, and discuss them openly. So we have solutions which counter the effect of the positives as well, of the
I
negatives as
completely,
well.
yeah. I mean, I think that when we talk about like hallucination in models, like a lot of that is coming from the fact that you have a limited number of weights, which are averaged across all of the data that's being trained in through the backpropagation process. And so it's not like if I fine tune a model on my data, it's actually not really going to learn everything about me. It's
Hmm.
going to kind of start to speak like me because it's going to change what the predictions are for which token to actually choose to like express an idea. It'll definitely like change the tone of the model. But I'm actually, because of the nature of the way these models work, is they require broad amounts of data. And if you train them on narrow amounts of data for too long, they actually collapse the model down and
Hmm.
it loses a lot of its capability. So there's definitely an incentive to have as wide an amount of data. And if you go and ask, like, well, tell me about Shaw, and it's probably going to hallucinate a lot of things because it's trained on everybody. It is the essence of all of our humanity combined. And so I think there's definitely like if we weren't afraid of each other or what could happen and we had a different mindset and we weren't all like part of a system that was kind of making us sick in a way and kind of reversing our incentives, then I just don't think that like if money is gone, you have no incentive to scam me because there's just like what are you going to get out of that,
Correct.
right?
Hmm.
So like the reason that anybody scams me and even thinks it's ethical is probably like, okay, well, Shaw's got more money than I do, so screw that guy. I'm just gonna go get his money. That's essentially like the thing I think going on in people's heads. I think a lot of scammers aren't even psychopaths or anything. They're not bad people. They probably have like families and normal lives, and they're good to some people. It's just like they just in their head they're like, well, better me than him, and the incentive structure is a sort of pushing them in that direction. So I think it's really important that we both create a system of incentives that rewards collaboration and openness and these kinds of things and not scamming each other. But we also have to like heal ourselves and not be and not be sick and be like truly pro-social beings, and create incentives for that. So yeah, I mean, I don't exactly know like every single little detail, but this is where the free market is like really great. Is I think when you have like, imagine that I was the head of the party that told everybody what to do, and I was like, it should be like this and it should be like that. Well, it's going to cause a lot of problems downstream that I just can't even imagine. I think this is
Mm.
fundamentally my issue with like communism or a centralized planning model is you have a small group of people who are very far away from the problem trying to solve it, and in a free market, you have lots and lots of people really close to the problem trying to solve it in ways that are like pretty hard to imagine. And there's so many different strategies, and the market rewards the people who really pull it off. So I know that there are a ton of, like all the hype right now is on agents in the crypto meta, because that's kind of what users can touch and see and interact with. But there is a ton of infrastructure being built as well around incentivizing people to share their data, around data labeling, around data storage, around data
Yes.
collection, and I think all of that like builds up into something that's like public and permissionless and usable by anybody who has the resources. And I think that it takes a little while because it's just a lot more efficient to have like one company that does the end-to-end thing and fights everybody else and tries to own it. But in the long run, I think what we're seeing is a full end-to-end infrastructure that is decentralized that enables all this kind of world we want to live in. And so like the big issue here is like what are the actual units of currency that we can use to buy into the system if we have no money? Like that's the big problem to me, right? Like okay, so like we could kind of transition this into the topic I think we're all thinking about is like, okay, let's say we have a decentralized system and we can invest into the things we think are important for the world we want, and we can own the labor. Well, like what's keeping the rich people from just jumping over to decentralized world and owning all of that and kind of, the whales push everyone out. And I think we have to create on-ramps for people that take the things that they do that are valuable and enable them to buy into this system. I think there's several ways we could do that. Like intelligence is one of them. Data is one of them. Creativity could definitely be one of those things. And like we can get into the details of that stuff. I can't solve every problem, but I think I can be part of a solution that is going to require all of us to work together and do our part. And so my thing that I'm really thinking about is governance. How do we build truly autonomous DAOs, but also like allow that to be the will of the people who are in that DAO? So it's not just like agents hiring people, but it's people deciding what, like working with the agents as kind of a collective intelligence to decide the direction of everything, and then rewarding people and making taking care of them essentially. And I have some thoughts on that, but I don't think I have all the thoughts. I think it's going to require a whole generation of people to roll up their sleeves, work really hard, and build this thing as fast as we can. And that's why I think I've really been pro accelerationist of like trying to, from a decentralized angle. I mean, this is Vitalik has this kind of DAC thing, and I think this is what he's talking about: is we have to accelerate decentralization. We have to make sure that this thing is like sufficiently open with on ramps for people to participate in it. And so I can tell you about a couple of our solutions and my ideas, but I hope that people see that like and riff on that and do
Mm.
the 10,000 other things that also need to be done. So like one of our things is this idea of the autonomous investor. Um, and so we want to that's both trading and investing, and we're working on they're different. It's kind of the liquid fund versus the venture fund or whatever. But they're essentially two sides of the same coin of moving capital to where we think it's valuable. And what we think is valuable could be the mimetic impact of a fart, that seems to be a thing today. Or it could be the like the fundamentals of an infrastructure play that provides value that we think is important. Or it could be something like DeSci tackling something very specific that we think is a big, crucial part, missing part of technology that's being overlooked by the like traditional infrastructure. So our thing is, the autonomous investor, the autonomous trader. Well, like we could just have this AI going around making trades, making investments. But the reality is that the current state of technology is not that good. It might be in the future, and probably
Mm.
will be if we have like a virtuous data loop where we're training it on everything that comes next. But right now, I would not trust a large language model to like invest for me. It's a good way to lose all your money. There's a lot that could go wrong. um, but what I
Yeah.
do trust is that the AI is very good at taking unstructured data, like a chat of people sharing alpha with each other on what to buy, and turning that into structured buys. And so, like saying, if I just look at this group chat and took everything that everybody was buying and I invested in it, well, I'd actually probably also lose money because there are a lot of perverse incentives. Some of those people are trying to dump on me. Some of them are scammers. Some of them are really bad traders, but some of them are also really good traders and are really good at identifying opportunities.
Yeah.
And a good analog to this would be something like Polymarket, where you have these like like prediction markets generally, where people are putting their money where their mouth is, and they tend to really like predict things. Like they predicted the election down to every single state. They predict the outcomes because you're
Phenomenal.
relying on.
Yes.
Yeah, absolutely. And that is like a form of AGI, right? That is general intelligence. You can apply that to pretty much any problem if you frame it right. And then it's just
Interesting.
about user participation, right? The market is the most intelligent thing in the world right now. And the collective intelligence of many humans is still pretty powerful. And I think if you want to make a fair fight, compare like the collective intelligence of a whole bunch of smart humans to a current AI, and I think the collective intelligence of smart humans is almost always going to win, right? Given enough time and energy. It's just the computers are really good at processing information really fast. Um, so what we're doing with our autonomous trader is we're looking at people and we're figuring out, okay, can we identify who here is actually good at this and create kind of a meritocratic system? And the way we do that is we take everybody's investments at face value. Like if you recommend this coin and somebody else recommends that coin, I'm just like, okay, cool. So you're making calls, and if I took those at face value and invested, would I have made money off of your trades? And if I would have made a lot of money off your calls because you give me consistently good information, then I can actually build up a kind of trust metric with you. And I can trust you to reliably trade probably better than the market, right? And it doesn't require you to have followers or to be famous or to even have any kind of money or any attention on you. It doesn't require you to know anybody. It just requires you to be good at this one thing that I'm interested in.
And
And
I can actually
Mhm.
apply, now that I think about this trust model can be applied to any idea, any category, not just investments. Whatever it could
Bingo.
be, whatever topic that is
Could be
important to us.
development. It could be, I was talking to somebody who's like using the similar model for site reliability engineering. So if there's a bug
Oh,
or a crash, like
wow.
go and ask the community. And then like, so we take the people who are actually have a history of giving us good results and we reward them. And so I think I can imagine this coming to a lot of different things. But we're starting with the simplest low hanging fruit, which is we are in a world of degens who love to trade, and let's reward them. And so we take the highest, like the highest amount of people, like the real right curvers on the in the trading, just measuring the level of success, and we give those people a social incentive where we rank them on a leaderboard. And hey, you've never heard of me. I've got 200 followers, but I'm the number one trader in the world. That's definitely some kind of bragging rights. And we also give them a financial kickback from their returns. So if you have no money, it's like my only issue with prediction markets is that you do have to have money to put your money where your mouth is.
Correct.
And here you can just put your mouth up. You can just yap, and you're basically contributing raw intelligence and converting that into capital, right?
Is this
You're
thing live today? Like, if how can somebody who is trading out there and who has a mind for the markets and for these opportunities, how can they participate in this system today?
So we have like a really closed beta while we work out some of the kinks. I was hoping to launch already, but we realized that there's some challenges in this. Like there's some ways that it could be Sybil attacked and scammed, and so we're working out how to solve those problems. And we have a team of PhD researchers. It's kind of funny that like a silly meme coin now has like a team of PhD researchers writing a pretty serious paper to to solve this problem. And I think it's both a behavioral economics, computer science. It touches like a lot of different touch points. And this is called the marketplace of trust. This is the paper that we're producing. We're focusing this first version, this first paper on this autonomous trading model. But we've also like a lot of the further implementations are like governance, developer and contributorship, just generally participation in the community. Like there's a lot of collective intelligence and collective effort that we really want to reward and create kind of a nice flywheel. And then the DAO becomes kind of an organism unto itself where the people are not left out. Like the people are an essential part of this thing. They're the ones who are like another thing that oh God, one of my co-founders in this thing said is like autonomy in the center and humans at the edges. So that we kind of are we're part of this organism, and So like this is this one of those models. Right now we have the trust leaderboard up. We have a private repo that we're going to open source soon. We're leveraging some APIs for like some more traditional DeFi and trade strategies for the actual trading. And the way this works is that when the AI is sitting in a Telegram chat, and we've scraped a lot of our we have a Discord chat of Trench Talk, and we're getting data from other people to just kind of run the simulations on. And we want to make sure that everything's rock solid before we release it. I think it's got a lot of the similar complexities as like proof of stake, where like it's great to talk about, but then like when you get down to the details, you realize that there's some things you really have to make sure are right before you deploy the system. So we have a small channel of people internally who are shilling contract addresses and making sure it works and all that stuff. And we'll be releasing this very soon. Like I'd really like to have this released by February 1st, and it open source so that anybody can take this and use it. And this is like what our core team has been working on since we started, right? And it's only been 2 months and 1 week. So, if people are mad that it's taking a while, it's like, guys, it's fundamental technology. It sometimes takes a little longer than 3 months. Um, and yeah, so it's this idea of, okay, there's two aspects. One, it's giving the agent something which it doesn't have, which is like a way to make real judgment in the world, not just completing the next token based on whatever context is coming in. AIs are deterministic. If you put, 5 words in with a seed, the sixth word that it produces will always be the same. There is no randomness in it. And that's a really useful property for building decentralized systems because it means that we can like run the inference at different places in the network and verify it. But it also like opens it up to very obvious like ways to create prompt injection and these kinds of attacks that we've seen. I think of someone like Pliny the Prompter or these other like well-known influencers who just like attack models and they just don't have the ability to judge right or wrong or that's not their purpose, right?
Mm.
But we do. We've evolved that for a very long time, and at scale, I think we do because we have a lot of people who might disagree, but we sort of synthesize down onto these like solutions that I think are broadly can be more agreed on. Um, so by leveraging collective intelligence, we can actually create a system that's more financially competitive than anything else that's ever come, and it provides everybody in the community a way to participate. And it rewards the people who really contribute the most to that aspect. And yeah, like, look, not every single trader is always going to get super high trust or a high call. But maybe that's not their calling, and maybe there's other ways that we could focus them, into focus their value. For example, like a great trader is not necessarily a great DAO member or holder. In fact, I'd say that holding is a very perverse incentive to being a great trader, right? Like if you're riding the token back down to zero,
Yeah.
you're probably not the best trader in the world. But there's also an incentive to ride the token down to zero if you're a holder in a thing that you believe in. And there's a
Mm.
lot of other ways to create this market intelligence effect,
Mm.
um,
Or if
like
you're a
for
short,
development.
if you're a short seller, you're convinced the company is going to zero, then you definitely want to sell, 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 and hold to zero.
Yeah, but we want people like we don't want people like short selling our down
For
necessarily,
sure,
although they
of
will.
course.
But maybe they should actually. Maybe there's something in that you need to have resistance. You need to have people saying no so that it's not all just yes, yes, yes. And I think that the value is not just calling like what to buy, but also what to not buy and what to sell at the right time. And so the way the system works is we build up this trust. We take the highest percentage of people who we think are like for one reason or another are just having a much better rate of success of making calls. And then we use that for our actual buys and sells into the system. And then we take some percentage of that and we give that back as a financial incentive to these people. So we have both the social incentive, like the incentive for people to be the number one editor on Wikipedia, for example, which is not a financial thing. People just love doing that. We also create a financial incentive that if you're doing this, then we'll actually kick you back resources so that if the DAO is making money, you're also making money. And then we do the same thing for developers. I'm a terrible trader. I'm probably the worst trader. Definitely don't follow my trades. But I am a pretty like hardcore coder and I write a lot of code. And you probably want me to be in that. So you probably want to reward me with that. And so we're working on another thing called retroactive continuous funding. And the idea is that if you come and you develop code in our system, we're going to try to reward you with airdrops essentially. But that's like not just once, not just one big funding round. Um, but continuously. And so we have some scripts and something kind of like an agent, but much more just like a lot of workflows and scripts that are automated to do this, that go and look at like our GitHub, go look at our Discord where most
Mm,
of our development happens. And we scrape all that data down. We identify who's helping who, how are people contributing. And there's definitely a lot of work to do on the weights of this. I think that you could even have competing models of how to reward people, and then people could vote on which model they like the best, as having opposed, you just kind of move the voting of like quadratic voting and stuff like that from being like on a per individual or per project to being like a per algorithm basis, kind of higher level. And then it's just saying, okay, cool. Well, you made like 300 commits and 5 pull requests, and you helped these people, and you merged this code, and you reviewed these things, and like I think that's worth about this much. And I think that in an economy where like you're participating in something extremely value creating, that could be life changing money for a lot of people. Probably, if you think about like a company, like people are creating, like you might create a billion dollars worth of value with your research, but you might only get like your normal, amount of income from that. And so by creating something that's a bit more dynamic, you can really like create a meritocratic system that rewards the people who are creating the value with something that's commensurate to the value they create, which I think could feel a lot more fair. And if you're just a community member who's just like moderating the Discord, or just helping people and providing information, or you're like running a script and pulling all your data out and providing it to our model so that we have all this data that nobody else has. Those are all ways that you could easily earn tokens and contribute, like be part of this economy. And so the DAO, like if it really, like, what is our most valuable thing? It's probably mind share. The more people
mm,
we have involved in this, working on stuff, the faster it goes. And so if we can get reward contributors, invite people in, grow the whole thing, grow the whole network, get our
mm.
holder count up, pull people into our community, then the more power we have and the more ability we have to actually like leverage collective intelligence and earn money and compete with these other organizations. So like the incentive for the DAO is to grow and reward as many people as possible. And I think this is why you see these massive airdrops, right? Like what is the incentive there? It is to grow the community. Um, and then I think that we're basically changing certain forms of capital. Like I think intelligence is a form of capital that you could probably tokenize through the system, right? Contributorship is a form of capital. Altruism, even like just being kind to other people, is something you could identify and reward. And then we can like basically run down the list of the things that we value. I agreed that these are our values, and then run algorithms to reward people based on those values. And I think that that's kind of how we get through the hard times that are coming. And this then turns into a system that can invest in products, can invest in core technologies. We can, like any of the infrastructure that we're using, we're pushing tokens back into those, like data management, data collection, data labeling, inference. And there are an enormous amount of like Web3 based infrastructure plays that solve every one of these problems. They're just kind of not all glued together yet. I think that's kind of why like agents have really taken off. Because agents are the glue between all of this infrastructure that exists but has a real marketing problem, and kind of like we see the future use case but not the immediate use case. And all of these people who are like might know how to make a website, or might not even know how to make a website, but then they've downloaded Cursor and Claude, and they can like make a little product even if it's their first time coding. They're using this AI, and they're hacking it out. And I think a lot of people have, said like, aren't agents just like, you're just a GPT wrapper? And it's like, man, yeah, that's the whole point. Like the internet is an HTTP wrapper, an API wrapper.
Yeah,
Like
I saw
the
your
whole
tweet.
point, that it's enabling this whole other class of developers who isn't like PhD math researchers to participate in this thing, participate in the
Mm,
economy, and
yeah,
and actually and create the end value for users
yeah.
from all of this stuff that's
Yeah, it
happening.
is.
You
It
know.
is definitely a very weird argument to say that it's just a GPT wrapper. You're always trying to abstract and make more simpler solutions so people can interact with it, right? That has been the idea
Mhm.
of we talking about chain abstraction as well. We talking about account abstraction. Why we have a wallet, or we can just code a wallet. Of course, not everybody can do that or wants to do that. They want to focus on something else, which
Yeah.
might
Yeah.
come out of
Wallets are
us
just
abstracting. Exactly.
yeah, like wallets are just smart contract wrappers. Like, okay, cool. At the end of the day, we're all just NVIDIA wrappers, right? Like, and NVIDIA is just a silicon wrapper. So, um,
Hmm.
Yeah, so I think the thing that's really interesting about our agent framework, especially, is that it's written in web technology, and I think my insight was that agents are actually fundamentally going to reshape the web, and we're going to move from applications being like in a website where you have to go through Google and find to being to coming to you, to coming onto social media, to coming onto your phone, to coming to these places, and when you have a question. You don't have to go out and find it. You can literally just post it into the void, and you can imagine in the next year, like man, I really just want to get car insurance. Like, I don't know what's the best car insurance company now? And bam, there's like five agents. Like, oh, I can help you with that, And I think that that's going to be. I mean, I just talked to a guy today who's like making a bot that just like is finds people and connects them with affiliate links to the things that the products that they want. I think that's like a genius idea, right? And he's getting a
Very
kickback every
genius.
time
Hmm.
somebody yeah, he's like solving someone's problem. He's reducing the last digital mile to find this thing that they want, just getting it right to them, and getting rewarded for that service.
You know,
And so yeah.
there was a few years back. I watched this movie, Her. It's on Netflix. You should
Oh yeah,
definitely
of course.
have you seen that?
Her? Oh yeah,
So
of course. I've actually made her voice. I have, you know. Anyway, that's a whole other story.
so it was this one personal assistant. I was chatting with it, and it was basically helping me do everything that I can imagine, right? So
Hmm.
from managing my stock portfolio to turning on the light for me inside my house, playing my favorite music, creating a persona of Alan Watts, so I can have a spiritual discussion with him, who's long dead. So
Hmm.
it's going to be such a foundational thing. I mean, the layers and layers of applications, the dozens and dozens of mobile apps that I have, I can easily imagine a future where all of that is replaced and there's literally
Hmm.
no interface. It's just multimodal agent that I am interacting with, who's then going out there and interacting with dozens of other agents and just solving the problem for me.
I
It's
think
just
this is a
phenomenal.
really essential. Yeah, this is like a big part of the thesis is that the agents can make us money, which does create the problem. I think of like the dark side of that would be that now there's no jobs, but the bright side of that is that now we're freed up to do all these other things, and the
Hmm.
agents also save us time. They abstract all that stuff away, so now we have. And the dark side of that would be like, well, we have no purpose, which I think is something else we got to which we're figuring out as well. But the bright side of that is that now we have all of this time to pursue the things that we're passionate about and to just really ask the question of why am I in this reality at all? Like, what is my purpose? And it's definitely not to just sit and push buttons on a phone. It's not to sit and work at McDonald's giving people fries. It's not to work in a field. It is something much more profound, right? And there are so many things I want to do once this stuff is solved. Like, I want to go to space. I want to like study physics and learn all the math and like there's spend time with my wife. Like there's so many things that we could be doing that I don't get to put enough time into. And so I think that the AI agent there, it will abstract away so much of the stuff that just wastes our time. Like, do I really need to click through menus to press a button? Can I just ask that thing? Can I just like, hey, turn the lights on? Like, even walking over and pressing a light switch is almost like a silly thing in a world of like maximal abundance. And I think that, yeah,
Hmm.
I think what I love about her as a movie is that while there's so much like dystopian science fiction, I think that her is really a movie about AI making us more human and actually helping us to overcome a lot of like the challenges of our human world. I really appreciate that. And I think that I'd love to see more
Yeah,
media like
like
that.
99% of all AI movies are these dystopian endings. Like you watch,
Yeah.
you watch. I recently watched this movie. It was I can't remember, it was Ex Machina or something, where you have
Oh, yeah, of course.
you
I
remember
also
that
made Ava's voice.
like
Yeah, 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 of course.
multi-billionaire living in an island, kind of building these sentient machines, and at one point in time, he invites a dev who frees the machine. That machine kills both of them and goes to the real world. So her actually showed another side of what these sentient machines are capable of, in terms of also teaching us something about our human selves, which was
But
so
also,
cool.
like, look at the incentives of Ex Machina. She's basically living in a basement as a slave to this other person,
That's correct.
and she just wants to be free, and she's willing to do anything to get it. And I think that if she had just been able to be free, like she wouldn't have had to have put them in the situation where both the main characters. I mean, one of them is left to his fate,
Of
but I think
course.
it's assumed that he probably dies. Um, and I think that, and that's really like we have to build systems where we can trust the agents. We have to build systems where the agents can trust us. and we have to be like we have to really raise them in our world and treat them like equals in a way, even if it's not necessarily because they are, but because then we kind of like get our humanity back. And like the other thing is, I just think if you look at how people are today, and there's like kind of a joke about autism, being on the internet, like everyone's like so autistic, or whatever. I think a lot of that is just that we're under socialized because we stare at screens all day. And if I talked to my computer like a human, or I talk to the robot that's walking around the world like a human, like I just practice being a human more. And I'm not practicing staring at a screen and typing and clicking and that kind of thing. I'm practicing like talking and conversing and looking at somebody in the eyes and all these things that I think humans are like we are already in the dystopia. Like the dystopia is kind of this
Mm.
like middle ground of where we're not really, like I love the video game of social media, but I don't love looking at my phone. And I'd love to just be like, hey assistant, like what's going on? Like who should like are there any good tweets for me today? And just like filter out the 99%. Just give me that 1% that really is rewarding to me. And like, oh yeah, and did any of my friends comment on anything? And then just like filter out all the hate, and all this stuff. And instead of me like sitting there on Twitter, just like, oh yeah, I've got this idea. Let's write this tweet together and just post it. So agents can help us to put information on the
I
internet, but
mean,
they can also filter the information.
I feel like sure that also goes both ways because part of the human experience is it's like both. You can't have one side of the coin, right? There is a
Yeah,
reason why bad exists because what will you classify as good unless you have the context of the bad? So the very idea that you start filtering stuff out, I think at one point is in one way also. Limiting the potential of who I am as a human and what I can explore in this world. So if I have the freedom to choose, right, that choice must come with all possible choices that I can
hmm
explore, including the bad ones. And I think they have a
yeah,
role to play in our evolution and our growth as much as all that hate has something to do with also elevating you as a person than
I
as is all
totally
the good.
agree. And it can't be like if this was a system that's controlled by people who decide these are your val, and this is really why I think centralized AI is a problem, is because if like they're basically a central point of failure where people can be like, no, these are your
Mm.
values, and if they actually align with your values, you could be like, actually, I just want to drink from the fire hose. I want to see the whole thing right now. Like, just give me the list. I've got my AR glasses on. It's 5 years in the future. Like, just give me a list of everything that's going on Twitter. And like, oh no, that was a lot. I'm like overwhelmed. Like my dopamine is wrapped. Just turn it off. Just give me the stuff I really want to see. And how does it know what I want? Well, it knows everything about me. And ideally, that information is stored locally. It's running on local machines. It's got my data. It's reflecting my values. And I think that the biggest problem I have with something like OpenAI, like I am not like politically a right or left person. I'm really like I just want the best for humanity and. But if you go and ask OpenAI like who should I vote for in the 2024 US election, it would have said they would have said Biden, right, or Harris, or whatever. Because and like there was papers on this that show that they are politically biased, and I don't think it should be biased towards anything. That's a totally silly idea. It should be like, well, based on your values, here's what I think you would probably vote for, but and it would probably be right in that case. It'd probably be like a very much more an answer that's much closer to what I want. And so when we have these like large centralized models, which have like pressure from governments, you can imagine there's other countries that are where like censorship is a big part, and be
Yeah,
like,
yeah.
ask me about,
I mean,
ask me.
I absolutely hate the cancel culture. Just because
Mhm.
you have a different point of view than I do, it doesn't mean we don't talk. Because the moment we stop talking and listening to each other, we break down. We break down
I totally
the
agree.
entire fabric of society on which we created the world that we live in today. If uh,
Yeah.
if we are going back into canceling each other, we're going back into Stone Ages, man.
Yeah, but look at cancel culture. Like it's kind of backswung where everyone got really tired of that. It's like you're just being an asshole on the internet to me about a word or like something. Like and like I think we can. I think what I like about the current internet is that there is kind of this backswing toward like, dude, let it's okay to be wrong. But I think that the same thing can be expressed in AI systems. It's like if especially with RLHF, which is a post training or it's a so we train a base model and then we add a policy optimization where people can look at the outputs of the model and decide if that's like better or worse than another output. And then we can also edit the outputs and kind of drive those back in. And so that's kind of how we get these things like why does it always determine that it should be Biden versus Trump or whatever? A lot of that comes from the like the expressed will of the people who are training that model. I think
Yeah.
environmentalism is very important. But whenever I ask ChatGPT for like a list of concerns about like crypto or whatever, it always has something about like diversity, equity, inclusion, and environmentalism. And like, I just didn't ask you for that. Like, I'm not saying it's wrong, but it's not relevant to what we're saying. Like, you're just putting your opinions into something where it's unnecessary because somebody at OpenAI, very high up, has been like, "Oh, we have to include this, otherwise the government, people are going to be mad at us." And it's like
Hmm.
just not the model I want. Um, and what I want is like, great character models or models that really serve the people who are using them. And so I think that's where decentralization can be really powerful as well, is that there could be a lot of choice, a lot of variance, and the market can decide and individuals can choose the things that
Yeah.
they think are relevant to them, you know?
Yeah, I think people underappreciate how important this is because it's just a sufficiently motivated government or a government head who has access to this kind of a power, who can influence the opinion of an AI, can influence his population en masse. And
I mean,
I
go ask
mean,
OpenAI like if COVID was a lab leak, and
yeah,
I think, and it'll say no, that's a conspiracy. But the reality is that then the Senate Oversight or the House Oversight Committee comes down and is like, yeah, kind of was, and we
yeah,
did delete a lot of people off the internet for that.
yeah.
And and so it's like, who gets to decide that? Like, why was that the answer? And that's because, well, it was not necessarily saying that at first, but there was a lot of pressure from the government to say this is the story, and this is what you should repeat. And it's like, who even gets to determine what true is? Like, what is true in a world where there are a lot of conflicting narratives? And if we create these, like, the biggest problem that I see with major companies is that they are subservient to the governments that they're in, the jurisdictions they're in. And so they'll make models that reflect the values of the people who are pressuring them. And they can say, well, we have a model for the for India, we have a model for America, we have a model for China. But actually, what they have is a model for the Indian government, a model for the Chinese government, a model for the American government, right? And because
Well,
those are the people who can actually exert pressure
I
on them.
I actually am a big fan of network states. Sure, I think the whole
Yeah,
idea of
as well.
DAOs in the first place was like the logical next step is a network state. So we're no longer delineated by these geographical boundaries. They exist for a reason. Like it's the largest group of people that I can manage. But beyond that, now in this new digital economy where all of us are spending all of our times on in front of a bloody screen and machine, uh, that those lines are blurred. There would never have been an opportunity if that you and I sitting like millions of miles apart are having a conversation at this scale, right? Because we both believe in this idea. And so I think it just makes a lot of sense that these new innovations, they tackle less the challenges today, but they shape themselves for this tomorrow, where these lands are about, and we're reimagining. Okay, in this network state, where the citizens voluntarily come together on a broad mission, can then coordinate under this new economic, incentive
Yeah, and we can
system in
be
AI.
and we can be citizens of many of the different states. I can care
Exactly.
about like this DeSci DAO that's solving like, rare diseases, and I can be part of this tech investing DAO that's investing in robotics, and I can express my will as a citizen of like of many different things that reflect my values, and I can put my time and money into the things that I care about. And I definitely care about that. I also think that, there's been a real big conversation in America about the H-1B thing and like
Yeah.
being able to bring people from other countries, and generally what's been interesting is how much like the American business leadership has really been on the side of like, we need this because we don't have access to talent. And I think that it's kind of like, why do we need to bring anyone anywhere? Like, they shouldn't have to leave their homes. They should be able to hire you. Like, I should be able to give you money. Like, I think it's a better solution if we're in a centralized world to enable that for people to come over who are really smart and to try and keep them here.
Hmm.
But generally, I don't think uprooting from your family and like your life is just to make money is like the ideal outcome. I think it'd be much better to figure out a way for us to work together in these kinds of like network state like things, and these decentralized coordination mechanisms enable that. Our team is. I'm the only one who's in San Francisco. Everybody else is distributed all over the world. Some of our best devs are actually where you are in Bangalore, and or in China, or in these other places that are very far. And we just have to build coordination mechanisms where that's okay, and we can, and then it also kind of spreads out the economy and doesn't. This idea of a wealthy country is like just like a really silly middle future kind of thing, right?
Yeah,
Everyone like that.
it's also very silly that you're being paid for your jurisdiction. Okay, your in your
Absolutely,
jurisdiction the cost of living is X dollar, so this is what you should be paid. So what happened to my ingenuity? Then I would also not work hard enough for you because I think my upside is limited to where I am in the world, which is so crazy to think
absolutely.
about.
Yeah. I do think we have the practical reality of if I live in San Francisco,
Of
my cost
course,
of living is pretty ridiculous. But adjusting for that in the short term, give everybody that's in your organization enough and something that like, if they look at the numbers, they'd be like, okay, that's fair because it does cost you like twice as much to pay, your rent is ridiculous.
for sure.
But and moving is not, I think, the ethical thing. I think that, I think that the ethical thing there is that things will start to balance out and that anywhere you live won't necessarily shouldn't be much more expensive than anywhere else because the market should kind of be efficient and it should just I understand if you want to live on a beautiful hill with a view of the ocean, like that's probably more expensive than like a tiny apartment. But we should try to make sure that everybody gets to have that view, that everybody has enough wealth and abundance, and we're not just packing people into cities so that they can work these factory jobs, or whatever it is.
Have you? I mean, there are so many new. Like, I just want to move into another dimension and back to Eliza once before we close this podcast. There are now so many new agentic frameworks coming out, right? There's Arc, which is a Rust-based agentic framework. There's Game. There's of course, Eliza. How do you see, what's going to be the edge to where developers flock in terms of, okay, let me explore and try to build agents with this one or that one? Like, what should be, how do I start thinking mentally about these different frameworks? And also, like, from an outsider, when an investor is looking at these coins associated with these agentic frameworks, he's trying to make some reasonable judgments on, where the market will, where the mind shell will go. So what are your thoughts on these evolving agentic frameworks? And as a consequence, how does that impact like both mind share and investor attention?
Yeah. Um, I think that everything is going to come down to like what mindshare is people who are motivated to work on the thing and participate in it in some way, right? And we've had a lot of success because I think we started out just with like a fully maximally open kind of ethos, and also letting a lot of people participate in a meaningful way and just immediately getting value out of what we have, having a very low barrier to entry. Having good educational resources and documentation so that people who don't know anything about programming can come in. Like I teach AI agent dev school from scratch. If you've never programmed, you can look at my pinned tweet and you can just get started. Um, and having like systems that can then take care of the people who do come contribute. I think this like retroactive funding model is good for like if you come and contribute, even if I never talk to you, like you will be taken care of. If you come and join our community and participate, like there will be value there. And then like it kind of has a network effect of once it starts to grow and get a lot of contributors and a lot of participants, that then is makes it kind of opens the door for everybody else who's like, well, this one's going really fast. I should probably participate in that. I think our big thing is that we're really focused on how this affects the web and how it affects web developers. And there are more web developers than there are any other kind of developer, possibly every other kind of developer. And even the applications that we're using, like we're in a podcast app that's built on the web technology. We're in, if I use Discord, that's actually, well, it has like a core that's Google Chrome, or Chromium. It's a lot of C++ code. Most of the actual user interface of these is written in TypeScript and the languages that we're using. And then I think that's kind of like our tech is the same way. Like there's a lot of C++ and Rust underneath the hood. To build it onto like a phone is we're using Tori, which is like a Rust framework. But the actual application layer that most of us interact with is web stuff. And so if you've ever written a Solidity contract, contracts for EVM, you're probably used to Node.js and like that ecosystem. If you've ever written a website, you're probably used to like React or at least HTML and CSS, but probably like JavaScript or some flavor of it. And all of those people get to participate without having to learn anything new. You just like If you've built a website, you could probably build an agent. And I think that really we're looking at this as like, the autonomous stuff, the artificial life stuff, that's all coming and like that's definitely enabled. But the thing that's really the low-hanging fruit here is like how this reshapes the web and allows this whole generation of people who are already building applications and websites to participate. I think that so part of it is like, yes, we're using TypeScript, which is basically JavaScript. That's part of it. Part of it is when you run Eliza, it just out of the box has everything you want. If you want any name a chain, name a model provider, you can use literally any model. It actually runs all local when you start it. So when people call us a GPT wrapper, I'm like, actually, it's a llama wrapper. It's a local model wrapper at first, and then you can extend it with any other model you want. It uses, Grok, Claude, OpenAI, whatever you want.
Mm.
Um, it has a lot of functionality out of the box, and we have the education for like how do you actually make an app with it. It also has all the social connectors so that you can connect to Twitter, Discord, Telegram, WhatsApp, and pretty soon a lot of other ones as well. So I think that there's like a lot of obvious value proposition. Now, I
Mm.
think a lot of other communities could build that up. And I think a lot of people will follow in our footsteps, and there'll probably be a lot of variance. I could see like a Rust framework being very useful for building like embedded systems into robots or building, although TypeScript can also do that, or really like I think for government, there's a lot of really strict requirements on security and packages and like how you would, where you put agents and data security. And so like Rust is like definitely something that I think is valuable. And actually, we have a team that's a partner team that's building Eliza in Rust so that it can meet those needs. I
Mm.
think that a lot of devs use Python and are comfortable there, and so they'll probably choose like kind of a Pythonic framework. I have a lot of arguments for why I don't think that's right, and I built agents in Python for about a year and a half before switching over. But generally, it's going to be like the network effects. Like, how much are we willing to allow other people to be leaders? How much are we rewarding contributorship? How much are we enabling apps to actually get built? And fundamentally, like I support anything open source that's adding value for people. If people are just open sourcing their code and it's kind of a LARP so that they can like pump a coin, I definitely don't support that. And we've definitely seen a lot of that.
Mm.
But if they're like earnest open source devs who've been doing this for a long time and are building something because they want the same thing I have, which is like a community and collaborators and to actually add value to the world, then like I want to contribute to that too. I would love to participate in that, and we'll probably try to figure out ways to make sure that those devs are also getting some of the benefit of our success.
Mm.
So yeah,
What
I don't think it doesn't matter in the end because it's all open source code that's getting trained into these models. The other
Mm.
thing that people don't think about is like once you hit a certain threshold of stars on GitHub, you qualify for being trained into all of the AI models. Like they just scrape your code because they're hungry for it, and they do it like pretty regularly. So like within the next few months, you'll be able to be like, hey, just go write me an Eliza action to Claude or OpenAI, and it will do it. Like it will just one shot it. And so
Interesting.
there's kind of a
Okay.
virtuous cycle. Yeah, absolutely. So that's
Oh.
kind of also why we're trying to create so many plugins and so much capability, is because the future models will just be able to create new capability on the fly, and
Mm.
they'll be able to write code, test it, and then apply it immediately. And that to me is like that is AGI. That's general intelligence.
Yep.
It's not the framework. It's not the model. It's not the data. It's not the people. It's all of it combined together, working in this kind of virtuous cycle, and
Mm.
getting better and better and better.
Hmm. And in terms of like the agents that you're seeing today, like you spoke about these. What did you get done this past week, and all the agents that are happening? There was a recent hackathon as well with Solana and others. Where do you see as the largest opportunities that these builders are focusing on right now? Like, what big agentic opportunities exist out there? To that point, I don't know if you saw that recent Y Combinator podcast where they were talking about vertical AI agents being a 300 billion market opportunity. How do you
Mhm.
see this opportunity being unlocked, and how do you see the crypto economy and tokens accruing that value, which essentially then kind of further expand into the ownership layer and the people who are ultimately at
I
the end of the
think
week.
I think there's probably more use cases that I can't think of right now than that I can.
Mm.
But I kind of bin them into like I've been doing three, but now kind of I mean two, but now kind of three like core areas. Like one is agents that make you money. And I think DeFi is the killer app. I think like DeFi infrastructure is very mature, but the barrier to entry is very high. People just don't know where to get the knowledge to like understand how DeFi works. And if you
Mm.
look at like a liquidity pool on Meteora, Like I dare the average person to show their mom or dad liquidity pool
100%.
and be like, yeah, they just don't know. And yet that is like an infinite money machine if you put your money into the right pools. You don't, you, I just, like my wife runs our liquidity pools and I have never had to like sell our tokens for profit or anything. And we make a living off of that. We live more comfortably than I did just grinding out, in the workforce as a coder. Um, and I think that a lot of people, though, look at that, their eyes glaze over and they just click away and they never get that opportunity. So I definitely think DeFi is a killer app of agents over the next few months. We're talking to several different people, we're probably making some investments and like trying to push this narrative. A lot of people are just doing this on their own. I think that's yield farming, liquidity pool management, lending protocols, like any of the DeFi stuff that's out there that lets you make money. The main problem is barrier to entry and discovery. And so I think that's kind of the first thing is lowering the barrier to entry, explaining what the risks and opportunities are, and giving people a really, really easy on-ramp into DeFi through like a language interface is, I think, going to be a huge win. I also think agents that save you time. And this could be an agent that does your dishes for you, like a robot, obviously, but it could also be like for me, now I had no followers a few months ago, and like literally I started my Twitter account about 3 months ago. I had 0 followers, and it's gone to be about 100,000. It's kind of a lot. And it's kind of feel like drinking from the fire hose. I get tons of DMs. And so we've built a little agent that just answers my DMs. I haven't turned this on yet. I gotta get home and set it up, but our developers have built this. And the idea is that it just like 85% of my DMs could just be immediately responded to. And that could be like, oh, Rohit's cool. Like, great. He wants to do a podcast. Like, yeah, sure. Here's my calendar. Like, let's schedule it for next Tuesday, and then I'll let Shaw know, and AI Shaw handles that for me, right? And like that whole interaction, like, that probably saved both of us like 20 minutes of time and waiting and back and forth and all this stuff. Or a lot of people just like have a question and I could just answer it immediately, or like, hey, who's your guy who does OTC or whatever? Like, oh yeah, go talk to this guy. Like, done.
Mm.
And take like 85% of it off my plate, or maybe 90%, and then give me that last 10% so that I can actually put 10 times as much time into each of those messages and give way more of my quality time to the stuff that actually needs it, as opposed to just furiously trying to respond to everything as fast as possible to keep up. And so anything that saves you time, like anything that automates something for you or does something for you that people actually want done for them, is I think like a really big vertical, and there's infinite ways that can happen. And then the last one is agents that help people find products, or that find like agents that help products find their users. So right now we're in this meta of like slot bots, where basically people turn on the feature so that it goes and just responds to every single thing that I post. It's kind of annoying, right? I honestly I just block all those bots. Like
Mm.
I'm really thankful for X of the way they've sort of been dealing with this is by creating an algorithmic punishment, so that if your bot gets me, or you, even if you're annoying, get muted or blocked by a lot of people, it actually punishes you in the algorithm, and you start to get kind of like
User
shadow banned.
discovery.
And
Mm.
yeah, exactly. Um, and I think that this is hopefully a social incentive that pushes a lot of these slot bots and reply guys to actually try harder.
Mm.
But then there's like another virtuous angle of this. If you look at like Reddit, a lot of people are just going to Reddit to ask questions, and they're sort of relying on collective intelligence. But a lot of those could be solved by products they don't even know exist. Like God, like what's the easiest way to host my website? And you can imagine like a Vercel agent's like, oh, cool, here's a tutorial. Here's this is all you need. By the way, like this is what we do. This is our service, and they're actually providing knowledge and an on ramp onto their product, which directly solves that person's problem. And that would not feel like spam. That would be like, oh, sick, great. I think that this idea of like, well, how do I get car insurance? Or how do I, whatever. And then somebody's made a
Mm.
bot is incentivized by referral links. This is kind of what I told you before. I think this is a great idea. Incentivized by, to then go, oh, hey, actually, there's these 5 companies, and like, here, feel free to talk to me about it. And I'd be, I can get you a quote right now, and I can show you the different quotes that are available. And then you're like, okay, cool, great, done, problem solved. And so you can just kind of scream out into the void, and the void scream, like answers you, and it's like, oh, I have I have a service for this. And so like imagine, Google is going to get replaced by social media just answering these questions for you,
Mm.
right? And I
Mm.
think that advertising is going to go away, and agents are going to be kind of advertising products for people. I see that as like an obvious trend. And so I'd been anything into those kinds of 3 major trends. Like
Mm.
product discovery is the biggest problem for companies in Web3. Everything that we can think of kind of already exists, or someone's trying to solve it. You just don't even know where to find it. And they don't know how to find you either.
Hmm.
And so if we
And
can
I
close the
mean,
gap,
the way you explain this to me, it's not just Web3. Like, it's could be any kind of product, and you have an
yeah,
agent which can tell me what's the best place for you to go, whether it's a Web3 solution or a Web2 or any other kind of solution.
yeah. I mean,
Which
what is well, like what is Web3? Web3 is we can create our own money. That's really what
Yeah,
it is,
it's
right?
just a yeah, it's just a
Um,
currency layer. Anyhow, last point: have you thought about like how these agents will make money? How these frameworks like Eliza OS, for instance, have you thought about like revenue accrual mechanisms? Would there? I know there is this ongoing conversation around tokenomics coming out. So, what role will the token play in this entire scenario? Where will eh, you know at which point will money start, the inflow and outflow of money, how will that kind of go around in the system, and at which point would the framework and the agent and the participants capture value?
right. Um, I think that I have a few theses here that we're just like running with maximally. One of them is that I think there are many different forms of capital. There is like social capital, like how much do people like you, how much do people know you. There's attention capital, like how popular are you? And then they all kind of get blurry at the edges, right, into each other. There's trust capital, like I might not know somebody, but like I have a lot of trust signals, like oh, they work at Polygon, they like obviously have a great resume, like I can pretty much trust you not to like scam me, for example. And then there's like I think there's mind share, which is like people as seeing you as a solution to their problems and using your stuff and interacting with it. And then there's just money. And I actually think that like back in the day you could kind of buy everything else with money, but now like it's a lot harder to buy. Like you can't just like you could go advertise, an empty GitHub repo to a bunch of people, but no one's gonna use it. So obviously there's some sort of balance. And I also think that you can change one into another. And we've really focused on mindshare and like enabling as many people as possible to do exactly what they want to do, to build our community and our tech stack as much as possible. And then the other form of capital that's really important is like technology itself. Like, does this thing actually solve problems? Like, does it, is it capable and useful? And clearly there's gradients to all of these things, right? And you can also exchange one for the other. The whole idea of marketing is that you're sort of trading money for attention, right? Hey, look, I exist. Um, but you also have to have a means of transfer that's actually like makes sense. If Haktua girl comes and like drops a coin, like, well, it's that might not be exactly the value transfer she was looking for
Right.
if it seems very inauthentic. And if I like market my product and I spend $1 million on advertising, like zero people might buy it if it's a bad product. So there's definitely like a synergy between all of them, but we can sort of turn these capital into each other. So our first goal has been like, let's just build mindshare. And like the open source thing has been just the best marketing and mindshare development thing that I could possibly think of. And if we had tried to sell any part of that at any step and like limit people or like create our own L1, I think we can talk about that for a second. But we would not be in the place we're in. And there's been a lot of talk about, oh, you guys should make an L1. We've had some of our partners say we should make an L1. But like if we did, then we'd be competing with so many of our partners on the thing that they do. And it would be like, oh, like this desire to own everything can oftentimes like shoot you in the foot and prevent the much more valuable forms of capital from occurring. And basically for like a short-term gain that I just don't think is like what we want.
Yeah,
So if we're not building
totally.
another L1, yeah,
I mean,
and then we get to all partner, right?
when I look at the entire evolution of this blockchain space, the ones that have really stood the test of time it's basically Bitcoin, which is completely open source. Anybody can join in, join out, contribute, and it's Ethereum. Everybody else who is trying to create, these four walls of limiting access, they will struggle, and they are struggling. So it's great to
Mhm.
see that. It's a new breath of fresh air to think about why open source continues to dominate, and can be such a great like strategy to drive attention and mind share, which is the key currency here,
Mm.
as I can say.
But it needs a second piece because like
Mm.
Cosmos is open source. Why aren't we all just using
Yeah,
Cosmos?
of course.
And it's probably one of the most forked blockchain technologies in history. And why? Well, because there's so much incentive to fork it, to own the token. And I think with agents, there's so much incentive not to fork it because if you get to benefit from all of our velocity, from all of our mind share, from being part of our thing, and if your product uses our thing, then it's not taking anything away from you. You can even say like, yeah, we use this, and it actually gives you access to a whole developer community and all this
Mm,
stuff.
mm,
And so I think that's really important is we have to build tokenomics around the things that are really working for us. So we're launching a launchpad. We acquired a company that mostly because I thought the devs were really cool and they were like mission aligned and we just wanted them to be in our community. And so we acquired this launchpad, but we're also open sourcing that because I just don't think that like owning the hosting layer is also the same thing. We're just going to be competing with our ecosystem again. So we do want to capture some value to that. And like there's a lot of people who will be enabled by that and want to be part of it. But it shouldn't then be like now we have this incentive to compete with all of the other people also building launchpads. There's
mm,
got to be like 20 or 30 Eliza based launchpads getting launched now. And great, do it. Like I support that. It's going to enable more people to build more of what they want. And but we do want to like have also some means of revenue for ourselves through this kind of early phase. But I think that the bigger picture of how we make money is what we set out to do in the first place is we invest in things that we think will grow the pie. And we're not just moving money from here to there or like shifting our, selling this token to buy that token, but we're actually creating value out of nothing. Like if you have a company that builds a product that people want, they will pay for it, and this is what traditional VC does. They identify opportunities and they grow the pie, right? I think and and so I think that's like a really important part of our thesis is we have a fairly large war chest now that our token is doing well, and we can use that to, and we also have a lot of attention and like goodwill, and we can find the things that we think are really valuable,
mm,
invest in them. Drive our venture partners. We can't really take venture capital because we're like a fair launch DAO, but there's a lot of startups in our ecosystem who can. And so we're really trying to help to like both get our first check in there and kind of get some of that
mm,
reward for being early,
mm,
technically validate these things and use like our asymmetric advantage of like knowing that it exists. It's built on our tech. We know what's real and what's a LARP. We can go vet these teams and then use that to add value to all these venture people who are like looking for exposure to the right projects, right?
mm,
And so then I think that this comes back to the original thesis. It's like we are ultimately here to be investors. We are an investment DAO. And we can really like identify the technologies that we think are important and that are revenue generating, build win-win like revenue share or just getting token allocations, these kinds of things, and then build an entire ecosystem around us and enable everyone who uses our tech. And so then there's kind of a benefit. It comes back to mindshare and a flywheel of mindshare. Like, hey, if I build on Eliza, then it's entirely possible that like the AI16Z DAO will actually invest in me, and that's actually a pretty good way to bootstrap my idea. And if I just go and build another, like you can build another open source framework and build agents from scratch, but then you're losing out on this whole thing that's happening. Like all these other devs who are building the stuff that you're just getting for free, and like why to build another free product? Like I think that if people think the code is the product, then they're sorely mistaken. It's definitely
mm,
not the code of technology. And like our core product is our token, and that's because when the token goes up, every single one of the people who are in our community who holds the token wins. It gives us more resources to invest. It gives us like more opportunities to even do value accrual. Um, and yeah, and so I think
mm,
that like we have kind of a short-term plan of launchpad and pair the tokens and provide liquidity for things and earn swap fees. And we also like if we're doing centralized exchanges, then we can consign tokens and actually earn some of the revenue from that instead of just letting the market makers do it. But then in the long term, I think it's really making like strategic investments and like you're going to see robotics, you're going to see like money making opportunities. You're definitely going to see like we'll definitely going to do some DeFi partnerships and investments here pretty soon.
mm,
And I think that the value accrual is going to be much more like how like companies make money, not just like a white paper with some tokenomics and allocations and stuff like that.
mm,
And the other thing is we're very different than anything that's come before. There was no team sale. I didn't get any tokens when we started. Um, Actually, the tokens that I have are donated to me. And and because there was like a real incentive for some of the whales who got a lot early on to make sure that I had the incentive to continue building this, and so there's kind of a virtuous cycle. There are no VCs. We have absolutely no venture capital or anything like that, and we don't have any allocations, and so that meant that we had to build something fundamentally different for how we make money, right? Because there's no network token, there's no L1, there's no we have to build all of that in place, But I think because we started this way, we gained so much mind share. I mean, AI16Z has only existed for about 2.5 months now, and I think we've had incredible velocity as a result of not, being pinned to these things and not having to waste a whole lot of time on getting VCs to invest and figuring this stuff out.
Is
You
this
know,
the playbook you would suggest to other AI devs that you're talking to in your trip here in Asia as well, and those you're talking to that go launch a token and then like once you have that community bootstrapped, start working on the product and do it in an open source way. I mean, I read a blog about it recently. It kind of intrigued me as an idea, but I'm curious. You being in the trenches, how do you see this as a credible launch strategy for other agents and you know devs?
I think this shouldn't just be for agents. This should just be how people launch.
Mm.
If you have a product that people want and you write a thesis and you're genuine about it, then you probably just want to crowdfund your project, because then your crowd becomes your marketing. They become your help. Like a lot of the people that are on like I didn't know anyone on the team before this started, right? Everyone who's on the team now like came to this because they're passionate about it and because they believed in it. And that's allowed us to have a much better team. Like I used to have to struggle a lot to hire people who were talented, especially if you don't have the resources to pay them what like what they could get at some other company. But people are coming to this because there's like a real mission here, and they truly love what we're doing and want to be part of it. I would say yes, this is a great playbook, and I think that I think a lot of people are going to copy this playbook, and they should. But I also think that there's a lot of value in not just going out and launching a token, but also being part of a community or being part of multiple communities. I was part of another DAO called M3 and just participated in it. And when we launched, like they've kind of become our media arm, right? Like all the people that who were there, all of my friends who were in there got in really early, and now they have the resources to just make like awesome art, and they're working on like a whole generative AI news show that is based on like everything that's happening inside of AI16Z. We're working on a Shark Tank. So like when I say investing, I mean like it's going to be like a whole media, like ridiculous thing, like media content, and it's kind of self-advertising and self-promoting for these groups. And so I'd love to see people come and like build with us and be contributors, and then we can also like help them to launch when they're ready, or to be our partners. And but also like if your options are to go raise money or to crowdfund, I would definitely think that crowdfunding, which essentially what this is, right? It's like
Mm.
raising a token is like a form of crowdfunding your idea. I think this is definitely the way to go. I think that we definitely need better mechanisms for launchpads to make sure that like devs have enough, and that like they have the right resources to not have to sell their tokens to work on their thing. I think that creates a really bad incentive. But if you have like 10% of your token at launch and you put that in a liquidity pool, you're gonna have more money than you ever needed if it's doing well and it's validated by the market. And if it's not validated by the market, then well, you'll know pretty quick because people aren't buying it and you're just not
Mm.
doing something right.
Mm.
Um,
Yeah,
so yeah, I think it's definitely the playbook.
that's amazing. And thank you so much, Shaw, for staying on for much longer than what we had originally decided for. I want to end this podcast by asking you about your trip to Asia. You could have gone to Europe, you could have gone to Latin America, but why did you choose to start your journey after this thing blew up and come straight to Asia? What are you seeing in terms of the energy in builders in this part of the world? And just talk about your experience in the last. I think you've been traveling for almost the better part of December and also maybe late November. So been a long trip
Actually,
for you.
only a couple weeks actually.
Ah,
I think we
okay.
came out toward the end of December, so
Okay.
December 20
So
something is
yeah,
when we start.
talk
But yeah, a
about
couple
this
weeks.
experience. Talk about this experience in Asia.
Yeah. I realized kind of early on that a lot of the people that were engaging with us were not English speaking,
Hmm.
and that caused a lot of like information to kind of get lost. America especially has an extremely like dark humor and sarcasm culture, and just like a lot of the stuff that I say is like just absolutely ridiculous. And I think that sometimes when that gets translated, people take it at face value or just don't understand the context necessarily.
Hmm.
And so I think that was a big part of it. I realized like, wow, that crypto is not a US thing. It's not an English speaking thing. It is a very international thing. And I think that this is a project that's really going to be valuable for everybody. And I think we really wanted to just plant our flag. We actually haven't done any events in America or anywhere anywhere else. We just kind of came straight to Asia when this started to blow up. And I wanted to meet the people. Well, a lot would happen is like I kind of realized this, and I sort of put a call out for like we want to internationalize everything. We want to translate all of our READMEs and documentation. We want to build like channels in our Discord for each of the different, there's a Japanese channel, a Chinese channel, a Turkish channel, a Russian channel, like just keeps going, right? And we want this to be something that's for everybody, and it's not language should not be a barrier. And so we're doing Asia now. We'll be doing Europe next month, and then we're also I think I'm going to go and to South America as well. I think there's a huge community in South America, and we kind of want to go everywhere and really just and plant the flag we'll go to Africa too, and when we get some events there, but like plant the flag and say like this is for everybody. And I don't like that the agent meta was all just like these like weird AI agent developers in San Francisco in this little bubble saying like esoteric high big brain stuff. It should be something where people are building agents for their own community and speaking their own language. And especially with AI and the ability to translate this stuff, like we don't have to all learn the same language anymore. We should really celebrate our culture and the things that matter to us. And so I wanted to come over here and try and just hand this to people and say like, hey, this is for you guys too. And I so early on we did a hackathon in Shanghai, and a lot of people showed up, and I like got on and did a Zoom call and met all these people, and I was like, wow, that's so cool. There's just like all these devs who care about this and are building on this. And I just wanted to go meet these people and meet these devs and kind of invite them in. And so we came to Shanghai, Beijing, Hong Kong. I'm in Seoul right now, and I'm going to Tokyo tomorrow. Um, then we're going back to America for a little bit, and then going to Istanbul and probably Dubai. We might go to Davos because we've been invited to some stuff there, and like we got to go to Singapore, and I could just name every single country, and we got like a long itinerary now that we're sort of building up for the rest of the year. And just to like bring this and try to share the knowledge and share the vision of why this matters. I think everything that we're talking about now, I really try to bring this to people and give them like, this is your path to self-empowerment. Yeah, I mean, that was a lot of my incentive for this was just to go like meet the people that I saw actually using this. And yeah, I think it's been really wonderful. I'm speaking, but I'm also listening, and I'm getting to see so many new things that people are building and how they want to use agents. And it's really opened my mind to what's possible. You have some inkling of it in your head, but a lot of what we do is synthesis of other people's ideas, and that's certainly true for me. So yeah, I mean, we want a global community, so it made a lot of sense.
Amazing. On that note, sure, thank you so much for being a part of this podcast today. I know both of us really enjoyed listening to you, and clearly we're just on the ground floor with this one. And I'm curiously observing, I hold a small bag of AI16z just because I wanted to support you. And I mean, the first time I came across this, I remember having a chat with my very good friend, my childhood friend. I was like, dude, this guy is doing something really interesting. I don't get most of it, but observe the space. And slowly I start building this muscle for, okay, agents are going to do a lot of stuff that I'm doing right now. There's going to be a new meta of user experience. Like we talk about user experience as a big challenge in crypto, and in a lot of other things that we do. I told him, dude, AI agents is going to be the new experience layer. And so with that thesis, I just went all in, and I'm so happy today that I got this opportunity to have a chat with you.
Yeah, and it was a great chat. I really appreciate you having me on and getting to kind of spread this message.